Welcome back to another segment of Behind the Scenes of the Waltons. I'm going to be taking more of your questions today in a segment of Ask Judy. If you are enjoying these segments, please do hit like and subscribe. I have a question here from Timothy, who asked about scenes that would have people dancing. Now, would there have been more than normal rehearsal of the scene? Not necessarily, because we were typically just dancing however we danced to that music. So we weren't doing a choreographed dance. So therefore, it was just up to us what we did with that music. And you'll see varying degrees of that at times. But that, I think, made it a lot more realistic because we were just supposed to be people going to a dance and we weren't necessarily supposed to be trained dancers. So I think it worked out well. He also asked, would you have certain actors, like some of the children, that would have been bored with the scene and as a result taken longer to film than a normal scene? I don't think so. I think everybody loved the energy of the music and getting to dance. So I don't know that these scenes were any more difficult or took any longer. And with the actors, the regular cast, we were used to dealing with the long hours and the many takes. So we were pretty grooved in. And with extras, background players that we would have brought in, quite often they were part of a group of actors, extra people that would be brought in. So they would know already who they were using and that these were people that could handle it. If somebody had come in at some point and not done well with it, they probably wouldn't have invited them back. And final question, can you hear music while filming? Sometimes it depends what we're doing. If we're just shooting the dancing and there's no dialogue, then yes, we would have heard a playback of the music that had been pre-recorded. If there was dialogue being filmed, then they would cut the music out so that the dialogue could be recorded cleanly and then layer it back in sound editing. Emma asked, how is it decided what season of the year an episode will be set in? Is every season of the show supposed to go through all 4 seasons in order every time? Sometimes it seems the whole show is set in the summer, probably because of all the green. I understand we were shooting in Southern California. But then I remember the voiceovers of things like it was the fall of the year. What would happen is we would start filming a season in May. Those episodes would start airing in September. So in May, beginning of June, we were shooting what would have been sort of fall episodes. And then as we got into the summer, we would be shooting winter episodes. So here we were, and it was summer, and we were hot, and we were shooting more wintry sort of things. So that could be challenging. You're wearing winter clothes in the summer. And then as we got into later parts of the filming season, then we might be actually looking in the colder time of the year where we're shooting summer things and having to get in the water or spray water around. So it was difficult for us as actors because we didn't sync up with the seasons, but they did not specifically every season say, oh, it's now spring, it's now summer, it's now fall, it's now winter. But you would see different episodes that would reflect that. Like the Easter Story did kind of all as an episode go through many seasons, and there was the sections where you saw Mary Ellen and GW up on the mountain dancing, and there was clearly snow. So we would have had to shoot that at a point where there was actually snow in those mountains. In the Love Story, I remember thinking how cold the actors looked, and yet it wasn't supposed to be winter. So we dealt with those kinds of aspects. In The Best Christmas, they actually created a sense of snow on the back lot, despite the fact that there would not have been real snow. So things like that would happen, and they would just create those seasons. Emma also asked, was there ever a story in the show based on an actual event of Earl Hamner's family? Some things were maybe loosely based on things that happened in Earl's life, but for the most part, it was all fiction. They were all just crafted stories, and it was not really biographical other than that it was about his family, but not necessarily the specific events of his family or the people that he had met or that had come through the family's life. Next question is from Dave. Can you do a discussion on lighting? I'm really curious how that works on a show, what type of lights, how hot it gets. I'm not really technical in the sense of lights. What I remember is that when we were filming, we had really large lights. You actually got to see a trace of that in the episode The Abdication, when it's supposed to be a movie set. And those were those big lights on stands were indicative of the type of lights that we were still sort of using on the Waltons. The big giant ones, I remember them, I think, referring to as 10Ks. Not sure why. Somebody will pipe in the comments and explain these things in more detail, I'm sure, and I'm hoping. Then I remember there being juniors and babies and inkies, and each one got progressively smaller as a light and what it was designed to do. Then I remember there was a point where we started using what they call 9 lights, which was basically a square-shaped light with 9 individual lights. Those were incredibly hot. And I remember in the wedding when Tom and I had to reshoot or shoot our close-ups for our I do's in the ceremony. They'd forgotten to get them on location. So they put us up on these ladders on the back lot of the studio and put these giant 9 lights in our faces. And I know I'm trying really hard not to squint. So what I remember about the lights was they were very hot. And then they would have big reflectors that they would use to bounce the light into different places to fill things. They would also have these big giant, what they called silks, that is basically exactly what it sounds like, a big giant piece of silk that they would put up on stands, sometimes when they wanted to block the actual sun so that they could have consistency in the lighting. They would do that outdoors. And same thing with the reflectors. Those would pretty much be used outdoors. Nowadays, things have really shifted and lights aren't as hot. They can do more with digital cameras to not have to have as much light. So it's quite different today. I've worked with like LED lights that aren't very hot. I worked on something where we use what they call these quasar lights that literally they had like magnets in them, and they could just like stick them on a piece of metal anywhere in the location. So a lot of those things have made it easier in some ways. If someone knows what they're doing with lighting, as a good cinematographer, then it seems like there are fewer actual lights and not so many big, heavy pieces of equipment maybe in the lighting that need to be utilized. So I hope that helps with that a bit. And then you asked another question. I noticed a ton of extras with lots of extra costumes. How much does that raise an episode's budget, and how hard is it for a director to coordinate? This was kind of a wardrobe department thing. So if, like for all the actors, we had our normal sort of wardrobe that we had for the season, and maybe some pieces would be added during the season, but we would wear a lot of the same clothes, and it was up to the costume supervisor to keep track of which day in the episode it was. Are we day 1 of the episode, day 2 of the episode, if it has a lot of days? And then to say, oh, on day 1, Mary Ellen was wearing her overalls and that blue shirt. On day 2, she was wearing her jeans and that plaid shirt. And so then when a scene is going to be filmed, they basically go in and go, well, we're on day 2, so this is the wardrobe. So they keep track of it that way. With Extra Similar, they know which day it's going to be, and they would have a stock of costumes for extras. And perhaps people would bring a few things of their own. With a period show, people tend to use less of their own wardrobe. If you were on a modern day show, if I was guesting on a show, I would often bring a number of my own pieces to my wardrobe fitting, and might end up wearing some of my own clothes. Same thing with extras if it is a modern show. For this one, it was the wardrobe department. So that just means that they have to arrange extra time at the beginning of the day before a big scene like that to make sure everybody has their wardrobe set up. So did it add to the budget? I expect it did a bit, but big scenes were a little more to shoot anyway, so it was just how they scheduled everything to make sure we got through it. That's what I have for you for this segment of Behind the Scenes of the Waltons Ask Judy. I will be back again for more behind the scenes of the Waltons and more Ask Judy. Thanks for watching.